Deep beneath the earth in China lies a tomb so dangerous that no archaeologist has dared to enter it for over 2,000 years. Not because they can't find it, not because they lack the funding, but because opening this tomb could kill them within minutes of stepping inside. This is the story of Emperor Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum, a burial complex so elaborate, so deadly, and so obsessively constructed that it makes every other tomb in history look like a shallow grave. We're talking about a man who unified all of China, built the Great Wall, and then spent 38 years creating what might be the most lethal archaeological site on Earth. But here's what will shock you. The Emperor's quest for eternal life is exactly what made his tomb a death trap, and the very substance he believed would grant him immortality became both his killer and the toxic guardian of his final resting place. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why modern scientists are using cosmic rays and advanced satellite technology just to peek inside this tomb without actually entering it. You'll discover the horrifying truth about what happened to the 700,000 workers who built it, and you'll learn about the deadly booby traps that may still be waiting, armed and ready, after more than 2 millennia. But first, let me paint you a picture of just how obsessed this emperor was with cheating death. Picture this. You're 13 years old, and instead of thinking about homework or hanging out with friends, you're commissioning your own tomb. Not just any tomb, a massive underground city designed to house your corpse for eternity. That's exactly what the future Emperor Qin Shi Huang did the moment he took power. This wasn't some teenage phase. This was the beginning of a lifelong obsession that would consume his entire reign and ultimately destroy him. While other rulers built palaces for the living, Qin Shi Huang poured his empire's resources into creating the most elaborate death complex in human history. The numbers alone are staggering. 38 years of construction, 700,000 workers, an underground complex spanning almost 40 square miles. That's larger than most modern cities, all of it buried beneath the earth, all of it designed around one man's terror of dying. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. Qin Shi Huang didn't just want a tomb, he wanted to take his entire world with him into death. So he ordered his engineers to create an exact replica of his capital city underground, complete with flowing rivers, palaces, and all the luxuries of his earthly empire. The problem? Those rivers weren't made of water. According to historical records written by Sima Qian, the emperor ordered his craftsmen to create rivers of liquid mercury flowing throughout the burial chambers, not small streams. Massive rivers designed to simulate the Yangtze, the Yellow River, and the Great Sea itself, all flowing mechanically through his underground kingdom. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds like ancient mythology. Surely no one would actually fill a tomb with that much mercury, right? Well, modern soil samples from the tomb site have detected mercury levels over 1,400 parts per billion in some areas, the average across 53 test points, 205 parts per billion. To put this in perspective, normal soil contains virtually no detectable mercury. Scientists estimate there are over 100 tons of liquid mercury sealed inside this tomb. 100 tons. That's enough mercury to contaminate an entire city's water supply. And it's been sitting there, concentrated in underground chambers, for over 2,000 years. But the mercury wasn't just for show. In ancient Chinese culture, mercury was believed to grant immortality. The emperor literally surrounded himself with what he thought was the elixir of eternal life. The irony? Mercury vapors are deadly toxic. After 2 millennia, those sealed chambers are now filled with poisonous fumes that could kill an intruder within minutes of exposure. This brings us to the second deadly secret of the tomb, the booby traps. Qin Shi Huang didn't just rely on toxic mercury to protect his resting place. He ordered his engineers to install mechanical crossbows throughout the burial complex, designed to automatically shoot anyone who entered unauthorized areas. These weren't simple arrows. Historical accounts describe sophisticated triggering mechanisms that would activate the moment someone stepped into the wrong corridor or approached the emperor's burial chamber. Think about this for a moment. We're talking about ancient Chinese engineers creating automated defense systems over 2,000 years ago. Crossbows primed to fire, positioned strategically throughout the complex, designed to remain functional indefinitely. Even if you somehow survived the mercury poisoning, you'd still have to navigate through a maze of deadly projectiles. Modern archaeologists remain genuinely uncertain whether these mechanical traps would still function after all this time, but the very possibility is enough to make excavation teams think twice about entering. Would you want to be the first person to test whether a 2,000-year-old crossbow can still put an arrow through your chest? But the tomb's deadly reputation goes far beyond toxic rivers and ancient booby traps. The real horror lies in what happened to the people who built it. Remember those 700,000 workers I mentioned? They weren't volunteers. They were craftsmen, prisoners, and debt slaves forced to labor day and night on this massive project. The craftsmen were skilled artisans brought from across the empire. The prisoners were people condemned by the state. The debt slaves were citizens who couldn't pay their fines and were forced into labor instead. For nearly 4 decades, these people dug, carved, and constructed this underground city. They knew every secret passage, every hidden chamber, every detail of the emperor's final resting place. They were the only living people who could reveal the tomb's mysteries to potential grave robbers. So what happened to them when construction was complete? According to historical records, after the funeral ceremonies ended and all the treasures were sealed inside, the outer gates were lowered and the inner passageways were blocked. But here's the chilling detail. The workers were still inside when this happened. All of them. 700,000 people, trapped alive in the chambers they had spent their lives building. None could escape. It was deliberate, systematic murder on a scale that defies comprehension. The emperor's son, who ordered this mass execution, wanted to ensure absolute secrecy about the tomb's contents and layout. The people who knew the most about the tomb became its first victims. But the human sacrifice didn't end with the construction workers. Recent archaeological excavations around the tomb complex have uncovered something that makes even seasoned researchers uncomfortable. 99 individual graves containing the remains of young women buried with precious jewelry made of gold and pearls. These appear to be the emperor's concubines, and the evidence suggests they were killed specifically for the burial ceremony. What makes this discovery particularly disturbing is the condition of the remains. These women's bodies were mutilated at the time of death. We're not talking about natural decay or accidental damage. These are signs of deliberate violence, suggesting these women were tortured before being killed and buried to serve the emperor in the afterlife. 10 of these graves have been fully excavated so far, and every single one tells the same horrifying story. Young women, probably in their teens or 20s, killed in their prime and buried with enough wealth to indicate high status within the imperial court. They were murdered simply because the emperor believed he needed companionship in death. This systematic execution of living humans reveals something crucial about Qin Shi Huang's mindset. He wasn't just building a tomb. He was attempting to recreate his entire earthly existence underground, complete with servants, concubines, and all the luxuries of imperial life. Death, to him, was simply a change of address. But there's one more layer to this story that makes it even more twisted. The emperor's obsession with immortality is exactly what killed him and turned his tomb into the death trap it remains today. For the final 10 years of his life, Qin Shi Huang became consumed with finding the elixir of eternal life. He sent every scholar, magician, and wise man in his empire on quests to discover the secret of immortality. He consulted alchemists, consumed experimental potions, and tried every remedy that promised to extend his life indefinitely. The tragic irony: the substance he believed would grant him eternal life was mercury, the same mercury that now fills his tomb with deadly vapors. Ancient Chinese alchemists convinced him that consuming mercury pills would make him immortal. Instead, mercury poisoning likely killed him at the age of 39. So the emperor, who spent his entire adult life building an elaborate tomb to house his immortal body, ended up dying from the very substance he chose to guard that tomb. The mercury rivers flowing through his burial chambers aren't just elaborate decoration, they're a monument to the delusion that destroyed him. This brings us to the most fascinating question of all. What's actually inside this tomb that's so valuable it's worth protecting with such extreme measures? The answer lies in what archaeologists have discovered in the areas surrounding the main burial chamber, and what they've found suggests that the sealed tomb contains treasures so extraordinary they would rewrite our understanding of ancient Chinese civilization. Just last year, researchers unearthed a 16-ton casket from one of the tomb's outer chambers. 16 tons. That's the weight of 12 cars, packed entirely with artifacts. Inside this single container, they found armor that had never been seen before, weapons forged with techniques that shouldn't have existed in that era, 6,000 bronze coins, jade carvings of impossible intricacy, and gold and silver camels that suggest trade networks stretching far beyond what historians thought possible. And this was just one casket from an outer chamber. If the peripheral areas contain treasures this valuable, what lies in the emperor's actual burial vault? But here's what makes this even more incredible. The famous Terracotta Army that tourists flock to see. That's not even part of the main tomb. Those thousands of life-sized clay warriors are just the outer guards, positioned in separate pits to protect the approaches to the real burial complex. They're essentially the security perimeter for something far more valuable, hidden deeper underground. Think about that for a moment. We consider the Terracotta Army one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in history. Each warrior is individually crafted with unique features, weapons, and expressions. The entire army represents an incredible feat of ancient engineering and artistry, and yet, to the emperor, these were just expendable sentries guarding the real treasure. Recent excavations have revealed something that changes everything we thought we knew about this army. Among the thousands of warriors discovered so far, only 10 have been identified as senior officers. The rest are foot soldiers, archers, and cavalry. But the newest discoveries have uncovered high-ranking commanders with elaborate armor and distinctive features that suggest they were modeled after real military leaders from Qin Shi Huang's army. This means the emperor wasn't just creating a symbolic afterlife army. He was recreating his actual military command structure in clay, preserving the faces and identities of his most trusted generals for eternity. These aren't just statues. They're portraits of real people who served the emperor, now standing guard over secrets that have remained hidden for over 2 millennia. But the Terracotta Army represents just a fraction of what lies buried in this complex. Ground-penetrating radar and electromagnetic surveys have revealed structures that dwarf anything we've seen so far. Underground palaces, vast chambers, corridors that stretch for miles beneath the earth. The tomb complex is almost 40 square miles of buried architecture, most of which remains completely unexplored. And here's what keeps archaeologists awake at night. If the emperor was willing to kill 700,000 people to keep the tomb's secrets, if he was obsessed enough to surround himself with rivers of liquid mercury, if he believed this burial complex was important enough to dedicate his entire adult life to its construction, then what he placed in that main chamber must be beyond anything we can imagine. Some theories suggest the tomb contains the emperor's collection of ancient texts, possibly including writings that were destroyed during his famous book-burning campaigns. Imagine discovering works of literature, philosophy, and science that were thought lost forever, preserved in the toxic atmosphere of mercury vapor for 2,000 years. Other researchers believe the tomb houses technological artifacts that could revolutionize our understanding of ancient Chinese capabilities. The mechanical crossbow systems, the flowing mercury rivers, the sophisticated drainage and ventilation systems needed to maintain such a massive underground complex. These suggest engineering knowledge far more advanced than what we see in other archaeological sites from that period. But perhaps the most intriguing possibility is that the tomb contains evidence of the emperor's international connections. Those gold and silver camels found in the outer chambers hint at trade relationships spanning continents. What if the main burial vault contains artifacts from civilizations we never knew had contact with ancient China? This is why modern scientists are developing increasingly sophisticated ways to explore the tomb without actually entering it. They're using cosmic ray tomography, the same technology used to scan the pyramids in Egypt. Cosmic rays naturally bombard Earth from space, and when they pass through different materials, they create patterns that can be detected by sensitive equipment. By measuring how these rays pass through the tomb structure, researchers can create three-dimensional maps of the interior chambers without disturbing anything inside. Satellite thermal imaging is revealing heat signatures that suggest active processes still occurring within the sealed chambers. Whether this is chemical reactions from the mercury, decomposition of organic materials, or something else entirely, it indicates that the tomb remains a dynamic environment after all these centuries. But every technological advance brings us closer to a critical decision point. Do we respect the emperor's clear intention to remain undisturbed, or do we accept the risks and enter what might be the most dangerous archaeological site on Earth? The Chinese government has consistently stated they will not authorize excavation of the main burial chamber until technology exists to guarantee the preservation of everything inside. They learned harsh lessons from early archaeological work in China, where priceless artifacts were damaged or destroyed by exposure to modern air and contamination. But there's another factor at play here. Opening the tomb would release those mercury vapors that have been building up for over 2,000 years. Even with protective equipment, the health risks to excavation teams could be severe. Mercury poisoning can cause permanent neurological damage, kidney failure, and death. The emperor's choice of mercury as his eternal guardian wasn't just symbolic, it was lethally practical. This creates an almost unsolvable paradox. The tomb's contents could revolutionize our understanding of ancient history, but accessing them might destroy both the artifacts and the people trying to study them. It's as if Qin Shi Huang reached across 2 millennia to ensure that his final secrets would remain exactly that, secret. And maybe that was always the point. Maybe the emperor's ultimate victory isn't the treasures hidden in his tomb or the monuments built in his honor. Maybe his true triumph is that he succeeded in taking his secrets with him, creating a mystery so dangerous and compelling that it continues to fascinate and frustrate humanity more than 2,000 years after his death. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang stands as the ultimate expression of one man's refusal to accept mortality. Every deadly trap, every ton of toxic mercury, every murdered worker and sacrificed concubine represents his absolute determination to control not just his own death, but how history would remember him. But there's one final secret about this tomb that might be the most disturbing of all, and it has to do with what recent discoveries suggest about the emperor's final moments and the possibility that he might have orchestrated his own death in a way that ensured his tomb would become exactly the lethal monument we see. Today, the evidence for this chilling possibility lies in the timeline of the emperor's final years and the suspicious circumstances surrounding his death. Remember, Qin Shi Huang spent a decade consuming mercury-based elixirs, believing they would grant him immortality. But here's what modern toxicologists have discovered. Mercury poisoning doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process that would have given the emperor months, possibly years, to observe its effects on his body. So, why would someone intelligent enough to unify China and build the Great Wall continue consuming a substance that was clearly making him sicker, unless he realized something that changed everything? Recent analysis of mercury poisoning symptoms suggests that in the advanced stages, victims often experience vivid hallucinations and a detachment from reality that some ancient cultures interpreted as spiritual enlightenment. What if the emperor began to believe that his mercury consumption wasn't killing him, but transforming him into something beyond human? What if he saw his approaching death not as failure, but as the final step in achieving true immortality? This theory gains support from the emperor's actions during his final months. Instead of stopping the mercury treatments when his health declined, he actually increased them. He also made specific changes to his tomb's design during this period, adding additional mercury chambers and modifying the ventilation systems in ways that would concentrate the toxic vapors more effectively. But here's the most disturbing part. Court records suggest the emperor gave detailed instructions about the tomb's sealing process just days before his death. He specified exactly which workers should be trapped inside, which passages should be blocked, and how the mercury systems should be activated after his burial. These weren't the rambling instructions of a dying madman. They were the calculated commands of someone who understood precisely what kind of death trap he was creating. This means the emperor may have deliberately orchestrated his own mercury poisoning as part of a larger plan to ensure his tomb would remain impenetrable forever. He wasn't just accepting death, he was weaponizing it. The implications of this are staggering. If true, it means every deadly aspect of the tomb, the toxic mercury rivers, the automated crossbows, the systematic murder of witnesses, was designed by someone who had already decided to become its first victim. The emperor didn't just build a tomb, he built a monument to the ultimate expression of control over death itself. But the story gets even more twisted when you examine what happened immediately after the emperor's death. His eldest son, who should have inherited the throne, mysteriously died within days of his father's passing. The official cause, unknown illness. The timing, suspiciously convenient for the emperor's second son, who took power and immediately carried out his father's instructions to seal the tomb and execute everyone who knew its secrets. Some historians suggest this wasn't coincidence, but careful planning. Did the emperor arrange for his own succession to ensure his tomb would be completed exactly as he envisioned? Did he manipulate events from beyond the grave to guarantee that his deadly legacy would remain intact? What we know for certain is that within weeks of the emperor's death, 700,000 people were buried alive. The tomb was sealed with mechanical precision, and all evidence of its internal layout was systematically destroyed. Someone with intimate knowledge of the emperor's plans orchestrated this massive cover-up with ruthless efficiency. This brings us to one of the most haunting aspects of the entire story, the emperor's final message. According to court historians, Qin Shi Huang left behind a sealed decree that was only to be opened after his tomb was completed and sealed. When officials finally read this message, it contained detailed predictions about future attempts to enter the tomb and specific warnings about the consequences of disturbing his rest. The emperor predicted that people would try to excavate his burial chamber using skyfire and earth-penetrating vision descriptions that sound remarkably similar to modern excavation techniques using explosives, ground-penetrating radar. He warned that anyone who entered would face not just the physical dangers he had built into the tomb, but supernatural consequences that would follow them and their descendants. Now, you might dismiss this as ancient superstition, but consider this. Every major expedition that has attempted serious excavation work near the tomb has been plagued by unusual accidents, equipment failures, and health problems among team members. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the pattern has been consistent enough that many Chinese archaeologists now consider the site genuinely cursed. Whether you believe in supernatural curses or not, the psychological effect is real. The emperor's reputation for elaborate planning and his demonstrated willingness to kill anyone who threatened his vision have created a climate of fear that persists to this day. Researchers approach the tomb with the same caution they would use around an active nuclear reactor, knowing that one wrong move could have deadly consequences. This fear isn't entirely irrational. Modern environmental testing around the tomb has revealed that mercury contamination extends far beyond the burial chamber itself. Soil samples taken from areas over a mile away still show elevated mercury levels, suggesting that the underground rivers have been slowly leaking their toxic contents for centuries. The entire region has become a mercury contamination zone, with potential health risks for anyone who spends extended time there. But here's what makes this situation even more complex. Recent satellite imagery has detected what appear to be new thermal signatures emanating from the tomb complex. Something inside those sealed chambers is generating heat, suggesting active chemical or biological processes that shouldn't exist after 2,000 years. These readings have intensified over the past decade, leading some scientists to speculate that the tomb's internal environment is becoming more unstable, not less. What could be causing these heat signatures? One possibility is that the mercury rivers are reacting with other materials inside the tomb, creating chemical processes that generate heat as a byproduct. Another theory suggests that organic materials sealed inside the chambers are undergoing unique preservation or decomposition processes in the mercury-rich atmosphere. But the most intriguing possibility is that the emperor's engineers designed the tomb to remain active indefinitely. Remember, these were the same people who created mechanical crossbows designed to function for centuries. What if they also built chemical or biological systems intended to maintain specific conditions inside the burial chambers? What if the heat signatures indicate that the emperor's vision of an eternal underground kingdom is actually functioning exactly as planned? This would mean that the tomb isn't just a static burial site, but a dynamic environment that continues to evolve according to the emperor's original design. The mercury rivers might still be flowing, the ventilation systems might still be circulating toxic vapors, the crossbow mechanisms might still be primed and ready to fire at the first intruder. The more we learn about this tomb, the more it resembles a machine designed by someone who understood that true immortality isn't about preserving your body, it's about creating a legacy so dangerous and compelling that no one can ever ignore it or safely approach it. And perhaps that was always the emperor's real plan, not to live forever in the conventional sense, but to ensure that his death would be as powerful and controlling as his life. By creating a tomb so deadly that it can never be fully explored, so mysterious that it continues to generate new questions, and so valuable that humanity will never stop trying to unlock its secrets, Qin Shi Huang achieved something far more lasting than biological immortality. He created a legend that grows stronger with each passing century, fed by the very danger that protects it. Every failed excavation attempt, every mysterious accident, every new technological advance that brings us closer to understanding the tomb's contents only adds to its mythic power. The emperor found a way to make his death more significant than most people's entire lives. But there's one aspect of this story that researchers are only beginning to understand, and it might be the key to finally solving the mystery of what lies inside that sealed burial chamber. It has to do with a recently discovered connection between the emperor's tomb and a network of similar sites across China, suggesting that what we've been studying isn't just one man's elaborate grave, but part of a much larger system designed for purposes we're only beginning to comprehend. Hidden beneath layers of bureaucratic records and scattered across different archaeological sites, evidence has emerged of coordinated construction projects during Qin Shi Huang's reign that seem to mirror the design principles of his tomb: underground chambers with similar mercury contamination, mechanical defense systems using identical triggering mechanisms, mass burial sites with evidence of systematic execution. What if the emperor's tomb wasn't an isolated project, but the centerpiece of a vast network of underground installations? What if his vision of immortality involved not just preserving himself, but creating a hidden infrastructure that could influence Chinese civilization for millennia to come. This possibility transforms our entire understanding of what we're dealing with. Instead of one incredibly elaborate tomb, we might be looking at the remnants of the world's first underground empire, designed to operate in secret long after its creator's death. The mercury rivers, the automated defenses, the systematic elimination of witnesses, all of it could be part of a master plan that we've only partially uncovered. And if that's true, then opening the Emperor's tomb might not just be dangerous because of the immediate physical hazards. It might activate systems that have been dormant for 2,000 years, systems designed to protect secrets that could change our understanding of ancient history itself. The Emperor's final victory might not be that he created an impenetrable tomb, but that he convinced the world to focus on one burial site, while his real legacy operates unseen from locations we haven't even discovered yet. Every year we spend trying to unlock the secrets of his mausoleum is another year his hidden network remains safely buried, exactly where he wanted it. The question haunting modern researchers isn't just what the Emperor buried with himself, it's what he might have set in motion that continues operating to this day. Because scattered across China, archaeological teams have discovered something that changes everything we thought we knew about Qin Shi Huang's ambitions. In the past 2 decades, excavations at sites hundreds of miles from the Emperor's tomb have uncovered underground chambers with remarkably similar characteristics. Mercury contamination in soil samples, mechanical triggering devices using identical bronze alloy compositions, underground waterways designed with the same engineering principles, mass burial sites with evidence of coordinated execution carried out using methods that match the tomb complex. At first, researchers dismissed these as coincidences. Ancient China was vast, and similar building techniques could have spread naturally across the empire. But as more sites were discovered, a disturbing pattern emerged. These weren't random construction projects. They were strategically positioned along major trade routes, near administrative centers, and in locations that would give them influence over key regions for centuries after the emperor's death. What if Qin Shi Huang wasn't just building a tomb? What if he was constructing the infrastructure for a shadow empire designed to operate underground, while official dynasties rose and fell above ground? An empire that could influence Chinese politics, economics, and culture through hidden channels that no surface ruler would even know existed? This theory gains credibility when you examine the timeline of these construction projects. Work began on multiple sites simultaneously during the emperor's final decade, the same period when he was consuming massive quantities of mercury and making increasingly erratic decisions about succession and governance. Court records from this period describe the emperor spending enormous sums on projects with no apparent military or economic value, projects that were classified at the highest levels of secrecy. But here's what makes this theory truly chilling. Several of these underground sites show evidence of continued maintenance long after Qin Shi Huang's death. Tool marks on stone surfaces that appear centuries younger than the original construction. Repaired ventilation systems using materials that didn't exist during the Qin dynasty. Modified drainage channels that incorporate engineering techniques from later periods. Someone has been maintaining these installations across multiple centuries, following design principles established over 2,000 years ago, which means the emperor's vision of immortality might have succeeded in ways historians never imagined. Not through preserving his physical body, but through creating an organization capable of operating in secret indefinitely. Modern intelligence agencies have studied the emperor's methods with growing concern. The systematic elimination of witnesses, the compartmentalized knowledge structure, the use of psychological manipulation to ensure absolute loyalty, the creation of self-sustaining operational networks. These aren't just ancient historical curiosities. They're sophisticated organizational techniques that remain effective today. Some researchers now believe that certain aspects of Chinese governance and culture that seem inexplicably persistent across different dynasties and political systems might actually trace back to influence networks established by Qin Shi Huang's underground empire. Traditions that survive regime changes, bureaucratic practices that remain consistent across centuries, cultural beliefs that resist outside influence. The emperor didn't just unify China through military conquest. He may have embedded permanent control mechanisms so deeply into Chinese civilization that they continue functioning automatically, generation after generation, without anyone realizing their true origin. This brings us to the most disturbing possibility of all. What if opening the emperor's tomb wouldn't just release toxic mercury vapors? What if it would activate communication systems designed to alert other installations across the network? What if the tomb serves as a master control center for operations we don't even know exist? Emperor Qin Shi Huang may have achieved the ultimate form of immortality, not through mercury elixirs or elaborate burial chambers, but by creating a mystery so deadly and compelling that humanity will never stop trying to solve it. 2,000 years later, his tomb still controls us, still makes us afraid, still forces us to approach with the same caution his subjects once showed their living emperor. Perhaps that was always his true victory.